How's it going, folks? Before we get going here, just a quick thing I wanted to mention before we get into this interview. We're about to sit down with a guy I grew up with named Tim McCready. We'll get into all of that in the interview. But Tim's an incredible artist and an amazing storyteller. And in that vein, sometimes when you're telling stories, not all of the stories are completely factual. I'll put that out there and then leave the rest of it up to you. Enjoy the interview. Tim's a great guy, great musician. Let's get on. On this episode of the AVB Podcast, we have come all the way back here to Toronto, Ontario. We are we're here with the Grand Wizard of
Emperor Wizard,
that's it, of 159 Manning Road in Toronto, Ontario. Mr. Tim McCready, how's it going, man?
Good to see you, AJ.
So for my audience, a little background on you. Originally from Windsor, Ontario, we know that, and then recently moved on. You're a musician, but recently won a Juno Award.
Yeah,
congratulations, man!
First year for the category for live band karaoke.
That's. I can't wait to hear this story. But let's start with you the same way we start with everybody else. I knew you back in the day in punk rock days, the early 90s, mid 90s.
Yeah, Wonka Vision.
Yeah, Wonka Vision. Let's go back even before that. Tell me about, you were born and raised in Windsor?
Born in Sarnia, but my family moved to Windsor when I was 2. So yeah, pretty much raised my,
Tell me about your family. Tell me about mom and dad, brothers and sisters, that kind of thing.
My parents still live in Windsor.
Okay.
My dad was a Baptist pastor.
Okay.
So, raised in a fairly religious home.
I think I remember that now, right?
And I would say that's probably influenced my, have you ever seen the movie Footloose?
Yeah, but I was like 7.
Yeah, it was like no dancing in the movie. It was sort of like when I saw that movie when I was 18, I was like, that's my childhood.
Was it really?
Yeah, no dancing. No rock and roll.
Really?
And that's probably what directed me so directly into rock and roll in my later years.
Are you religious?
No.
Not at all?
I would classify myself as agnostic, or I guess I would say that it's not really, I don't know if I could say atheist, because I think that it's just not really part of my life.
Right.
Anymore. It's not something it was so, growing up as a child, it was such a big part of my life,
right,
that I'd rather now not be against it, but more just like, it's just not really part of my life.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. When did that transition start for you?
I would say the big transition happened when I was 21. First I left Windsor to go to Recording Arts Canada up in Hamilton for recording school. I was interning at Sonic Onion Records, and then I got these 3 internships in a row in the US. So I went to Austin and interned at this Christian metal magazine called HM Magazine. It used to be called Heaven's Metal.
Okay.
And I interned there for 2 months, and then I went to Chicago for 2 months and lived at this commune that had been around since the 70s called JPUSA, Jesus People USA. So it was like a 400-person commune.
All right.
They'd throw this big...
In Chicago?
Yeah, uptown Chicago.
All right.
They lived in like a former 5-star hotel on West Wilson.
Wait, there's fucking urban communes?
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
I think commune, the first thing I think is a bunch of hippies in the woods.
Well, this would have started, I think, in the early 70s. Because, there was like, I guess they called them like Jesus freaks. There was like Christian hippies back in that era. So I guess this group had come down from Milwaukee that sort of had a commune there. And then they started this thing in Chicago. And then they ran this giant like alternative Christian music festival for years called Cornerstone in Illinois. And this commune also owned, I don't really know what's going on with them today, like, because this is almost 20 years ago that I stayed there. I don't keep in touch with them, but they had like the largest independent roofing supply company in Chicago. So that was like one of their means of income.
Right.
And then I interned at their record label.
How did you find out about them? How did you get involved with them?
Because they threw this giant festival. There would be like 40,000 people would come out every year. So I'd gone out to that. And sort of, like I had grown up in, you know me from the punk rock days.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I was, as a teenager, I was punk, but I was also Christian.
Because I remember you were like one of those kids that identified as like straight edge.
Yeah.
Right. And now that you bring it up, it wasn't something that I remembered walking in the door, but now that you bring it up, I remember you being like a religious kid. But I also remember you being like one of the nicest human beings that I had known around that. Like you were just very always open to like you weren't closed off to anyone or anything. Like that was the main sort of like.
Oh, yeah. I think during that era, I just wanted to make friends. And even though I was raised with certain conservative values or values that I definitely don't hold today. But as far as like on a one-on-one level and just getting to know people, I just wanted to have friends. I just wanted to like, in regards to those kind of, things, those Christian kind of things, it was definitely not like, I just wanted to be friends with everybody. Yeah,
no. That's what I remember. I don't want to I actually want to talk about a lot of that stuff, but I don't want to side rail this. So, okay, so I knew you coming up as a punk rock kid, but you had started moving more into this like...
Well, just sort of when Tooth and Nail Records came out, which was like, they had like, MXPX and Strong Arm and all these like, Christian hardcore and punk bands that sort of reconciled my aesthetic tastes with my beliefs.
Gotcha.
So HM magazine was sort of the magazine that covered that scene. And then Japuza had that Christian music festival called Cornerstone, and they would feature, and this was like 40,000 people would come out from across the country, and they would host a lot of these bands at that festival. And so I was able to be involved there. And then I went out to Seattle and interned at Tooth and Nail Records for 2 months. And I sort of had this thing where I sort of, all the unanswered questions that I had were answered, and I just didn't believe anymore. And it was, it would have been much easier to be on, in retrospect. I mean, at the time, all my family are all born again Christians, everyone except for me. And I had all these contacts in the industry that I'd spent money doing all these internships, and all of a sudden it was like my eyes were opened. I couldn't believe anymore. And it would have been much easier on a social level if I could have believed, continue to believe, or pretend to believe, but
that's a really, really interesting perspective coming up through, because it's interesting because you came up through the entertainment industry in a already sort of like subcultured culture. Right?
Yeah.
And when you talk about you came to your conclusions, but you also know that it would have been much easier if it had just been the other way. Do you think you ran into anybody who made the other decision?
I mean, this is the thing. I think with like that kind of stuff, it's like, I don't know if you can fake it.
That's really interesting.
Because why would you want to be there otherwise?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the Christian music industry does have a lot of money. But, I wrote interviews still as I was because it was a process over those next few years. Like my eyes were sort of open, but then I was writing for HM Magazine. I came back to Windsor after that, went to University of Windsor. I was in the visual arts communications program.
Right.
And I so I lost my train of thought for a second. I came back. Oh, I was writing for HM Magazine. So I was doing interviews with like Christian hardcore bands.
Right.
And definitely everybody, the same story I kept hearing from everybody was that they wanted to play to mainstream audiences. They didn't necessarily want to play to Christian audiences.
Mm-hmm.
I think in a lot of cases, there are people like me who were raised in a certain circumstance. Gotcha. And they're always just trying to like get out there, be accepted by people who weren't just from their subculture.
It's funny because it's almost an exact contrast to the question I asked you, but that's kind of been my experience too, because anybody that I've actually dealt with, I like to believe, because I'm an atheist, but there's a piece of me that would like to believe that there are some people that have decided that, no, all of this stuff is nonsense, but hey, I've got a living to make. But I think you're absolutely right. It might actually work way more the other way, that everybody that I've ever met that was heavily involved in the church, there was nothing but complete honesty behind it. I've never met even the people that kind of like at the top, You know what I mean? Like the Joel Osteens, whatever. Not that I've met Joel Osteen.
Yeah.
But you watch that guy and it's like, son of a bitch. He's like sincere, which is, I don't know if that's better or worse, but but at least it's sincere. Anyway, weird topic, but
yeah. And, and now in my life, it's like, I don't know any Christians now.
No.
Yeah, that's just not like a part of my life. And it's not like, I don't know people in Toronto that are like that, other than, I do, occasionally I'm part of a Shake Note singing group, that meets at, Bloor Street United Church, which, I haven't gone in a year, but I've been going on and off for 7 years. But even United Church, like they like everybody.
Right.
They like, they like gay people. They like other religions. Mm. So it's not.
United Church to me always seemed like a halfway house.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I think they like everybody. So that's the closest connection I would still have to that stuff.
Mm.
Other than my family, but we. I think they can respect where I'm from.
Talk to me about the early process of all of that, because you said growing up, like dancing and music, like wasn't even a thing that was allowed.
Yeah.
How did it become a thing that was so important to you that you were going off to cover the entertainment world?
Well, because I still went to public school. I didn't go to Catholic school or a private Christian school. I went to public school, but in my family, that was just like, Jesus was always such a big thing. And also, I discover music I like, and then that would be taken away from me. Be like, that's not Christian. So that was the house, right? Yeah. So it sort of like built a void in my life where like I became obsessed with pop culture and all these things that I wasn't supposed to have.
Mm-hmm.
Then it just like made me just like crave it that much more.
Was there like a confrontation moment about it between you and your parents?
When I was coming out of that and then I started going to University of Windsor, I just like sort of kept it under my hat because I knew that wasn't a discussion that I could possibly win.
So you were doing this around your parents?
Doing what?
Like music and...
Oh yeah, like my dad used to drive Wonkavision to all of our gigs, back at the Acapulco Delight back in the day.
Okay.
So, my dad was definitely, by the time I guess I was in my teens, they were more supportive of me doing stuff like that. But then at the same time, they still had a curfew. Like we'd play these shows and I'd never get to see the Lager Lads because they'd always play after my curfew. My dad would come pick us up. And it's not that I didn't want it. I desperately wanted to be there and see the other bands we were playing with.
Talk to me about that transition between like, no, there's no music period to like, okay, I'm going to be your dad driving you to your gigs. Like, how does that transit? Like, do you have?
I think it's. I think it was just a process, I think like I don't have kids, probably never going to have them at this point, but I think from where they were, it's like you have these set rules of like my kids are going to be like this, I'm going to raise them like this, like they're born, and you're like, hey, this is how it's going to be, and then they get older, and you're trying to hold them in place, and it's like eventually you have to loosen the rules a bit because it's just like they just keep hitting their heads against like, no, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this, and eventually, he had to relent a bit.
That's really interesting to me. It's just interesting to me because it's kind of the exact opposite story of what you normally hear from somebody who makes art and music a living.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like usually the best, like the most quote unquote successful, for that's a whole other thing, but the most successful musicians and artists that I know, their stories were always similar. It was always like right from the beginning, they had the most support possible in that. And to me, it almost seems like you had to fight your way entirely through it.
Yeah.
Do you know where that drive came from? Like, do you have any explanation from it? Like, do you know what your first connection to it was?
I mean, I could go back to like, for example, like, listening to like country music on the radio when I was 5 and then going around the house and my parents hearing me sing these songs and then being like, what are you singing? And then them listening to it and then like taking it away from me. Like, that's bad. You can't listen to that.
Where did you find that though?
I don't know. It's just like,
it was just there.
Yeah. I think I just flipped on a radio or something,
oh, okay.
But I was always, and I was always good at drawing. So I was like always, inclined towards the arts, was really into like cartoons and drawing and, I'm definitely not an athletic guy, but I feel like I just sort of draw towards the arts. That was just sort of like how I was built, I feel like.
Right. It's very cool to me. So talk to me about, because we were talking about it a little bit before we started recording. Talk to me about your transition from Windsor to Toronto.
So I went to University of Windsor. I had done those internships in the States. 2 months Austin, 2 months Chicago, 2 months Seattle, came back.
Those were in a row like that?
Yeah,
so it was
all
like
in a row.
basically you're gone for half a year?
Yeah. And then I came back and realized, that I, being 21, I was offered a job out in Seattle, but I couldn't accept the job legally, being like no degree. So I was like, okay, got to go back to university. Just got to get a piece of paper.
Right.
So I rammed through my 4-year degree in 5 semesters, just took as many classes as I could at once, like 6-7 classes at a time. And then after that, I spent like 6 months painting houses in Windsor. And then I got a job on cruise ships doing theater production.
Really?
Yeah, I went down to Florida and worked for Princess Cruises.
Mm-hmm. How was that experience?
I always say that if I had known that I was only going to do that job for a year, I would have enjoyed it a lot more.
Right. Because
I sort of felt like, is this how I'm going to spend the rest of my 20s? Is stuck on cruise ships. There's no, the internet connection is bad. And I was so obsessed at that time with like changes in musical styles or changes in fashion and like that, how these things would like, I was interested in, just like what's out there. And as things change on a month to month basis, like, I would say that that's not something I'm as attuned to anymore, but at the time it felt very natural to me.
Right.
And so being on a cruise ship where you don't have like access to the outside,
right.
World as much, it's, I was just worried that I was going to spend the next 10 years there. And I think I should have, but if I had just embraced the moment and known like
there's all this other shit you had access to that you just ignored because you were like, no, I need more punk fashion.
Yeah, it was a good experience in the long term. And then
what does it work like? Because I know working on cruise ships, like basically you get like you're in steerage class and you get, you know what I mean? It's not
well being in theater production. So we would have I'd have like maybe 4 hours of work a day. So I would like have to like run a mic for pool games in the morning. And then I'd have a bunch of hours off. And then we'd have, and then I might have to run Spotlight or like help backstage for like one of the big shows.
Right.
Cause they had like 16 dancers on staff and like singers. So it was like, like a 1,000 person or a 700 person theater. So they'd have like different shows a few nights a week.
Right.
So it was like pretty easy work.
Did you get a lot of your own time that you could just kind of hang out and do?
Oh yeah, I read a lot of books, watched a lot of movies.
Yeah.
Got into John Waters. They had one of the in the crew film library, one of the guys that ran that was a big John Waters fan.
Okay.
So he had stocked up all those movies.
Oh, nice.
That's how I discovered him.
So you found John Waters on cruise ships?
I did, yeah.
That's hilarious.
I'd never heard of him before. And then
because I found John Waters in the 90s, like through the punk rock days.
Yeah, which makes sense.
There was a university theater that played Pink Flamingos.
One of my favorite movies.
Right, that says as much as we need to know about both of us. But yeah, I found it in Windsor during the punk rock days. Mm-hmm. So you found it on the cruise ship.
Yep.
Weird place to start getting into John Waters.
Yeah. Actually, the guy who had stocked those up, his name was Virago, or that was maybe his, because I think that maybe was his drag name, and he had been a roommate of Christian Aldo's in Vancouver, I think.
Okay.
At some point, and he was like, because he was, you're from Windsor? Do you know Christian Aldo? I'm like, I do know who that guy is.
That's hilarious because I'm 90% sure the reason I saw Pink Flamingos was because of Christian Aldo.
So maybe Christian Aldo got that guy into
that's
it.
Kind of.
And then, roundabouts how I got into
weird.
it. But,
so weird.
So I did two contracts, 2 6-month contracts on Princess Cruises. So it was like winter in Caribbean, Alaska in the summer.
Nice.
And then came back. I was in Windsor on vacation from the cruise ships for a month, and a friend showed me there was an ad on Viceland.com for Vice Magazine's website. and they were looking for somebody in Canada, and he sent me the link. He was like, dude, this is your job. And I had like discovered Vice had been around, I guess, for 10 years at that point. And I had only discovered them maybe a year and a half or 2 years earlier. They had put out a book through Warner, The Vice Guide to Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll.
Okay.
And I read that and I was like, this is me. Like this is me.
Oh, nice.
And you know, and like it was very hard to get the magazines. They didn't have any in Windsor, and like they're limited runs. So you know, when I would come up to Toronto, I had a few copies that I would get up here, and then I was away on cruise ships for a year, and then you know, heard about this job posting, and I sent them an email this long, being like, I've done this, and I did, you know, and I think they were like, I came up for an interview and they were like, so you used to work in the Christian music industry and you're working on cruise ships now and you want to, and if we don't hire you, you're just going to go back to cruise ships. It's like, yes, it was sort of the short version of,
nice.
Because I told them a lot more than that. Mm-hmm. And they were like, you got a crazy story. What are we going to do? Say no? Because I think everybody else they interviewed was just like,
I'm a journalism student.
Yeah, or just dudes from around Toronto, whereas I had this crazy fucking story.
Right.
And so then that's what I moved up here for.
Did you know your story was crazy before?
Yeah, I think so, because I also had felt like before I did those internships, I was like, you know, you can't see this on camera, but you can see, you know, this giant library I have here. Like that, I started reading books like voraciously, like right when I was graduating from high school. So this is like 97. I was like, you know, so this is like the tail end of the WonkaVision days. Cause I think I did WonkaVision for like 2 years. Okay. And we think we played like 36 shows in a year and a half. Right. I was just like real into it. And then towards the end of high school, I was like, oh my God, like I have no connections in my life to get me anywhere that I want to go. And like, I have like, no trajectory. Like this is real. I'm getting out of high school now. Like life is about to starting. Mm-hmm. And I just started buying books about, you know, cause this is, you know, just as the internet was kind of getting mainstream. Yeah. So, you know, like, I just would go into independent bookstores, buying things that I was interested in with the music industry and just reading them all cover to cover. And that's like how this library started out here, was me just so at that point, like, or, you know, me leading, I spent like 2 years just like before I went to recording school, right? Just like reading all these books until I got burnt out on just like burying my nose in a book. Yeah, absorbing. But I just absorbed so much information. But that was the thing. I knew that I didn't have any sort of, I'd read all these books. I had all this stuff in my head.
How did you even know that was a direction to go in?
I don't know.
It was just a thing that you were doing.
Okay. But it was sort of like, and it's a very solitary thing to have your nose just buried in a book. And it wasn't going to school. It was because I was like, I know what I want to learn. I want to learn about the things that I want to know about. Right. So I knew before I did those internships that I didn't have anything in my resume to be like, I hadn't done anything. Right. I mean, I guess I didn't like the WonkaVision stuff and anything, but it's like, that's the thing. I just had all this information in my head. Right. But nothing to be like, this is who I am. This is what I've done. Right. So I think I was definitely on a mission for a long time to try and put myself in a position. And I was willing to, I especially back then, I was definitely had it in my mind. I was willing to suffer for it. Yeah. You know, I was like, I want to do something. I want to do some things in life, and it doesn't have to feel good all the time.
That's a really interesting perspective, because I think that's a major blocking point for a lot of people who start off wanting to be creative.
Well, and I knew that, I mean, this is a kind of a bit of a Protestant perspective of like, in this whole like life is suffering type of thing. But it's like, okay, like, I'm going to suffer either way, because like I don't have there wasn't an easy path for me to take. Right. Like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to give up, and I'm going to, oh wait, there's nothing for me to fucking do, because I was obsessed with music. Mm-hmm. I was obsessed with, you know, art and like, you know, just my personal interests. That's where my brain was. And it's like, there wasn't something to just give up. And because, even the things that like aren't creative in Windsor that like, oh, you could just work at one of the, auto plants or something. It's like, I didn't have any connections. My family wasn't like that. It's like, you got to have a family connection to get these places. So it seemed very obvious to me that like, I'm going to suffer either way in life. So I'm either going to suffer for the things that I want, and maybe I can, in the end, get what I want, or I can suffer trying to make other people happy. And then I can get those things, and like, I'm still going to be miserable when I get those things because it's not what I want.
It's amazing to me that you had that perspective so early, because I quite honestly, and spent my entire life sort of in the pursuits of arts, for lack of a better term, only came to that fucking conclusion 2 years ago. And took me this entire time to come up, and until you come up with that exact idea, you're fucked.
Yeah.
Because everything else, for like, to put it in contrast, not to make this about me, but to put it in contrast, my entire life, it was like, okay, well, there's these things I want to do, but like, I don't want to hurt for it.
Yeah.
Well, if you're not going to hurt for it, you're not going to fucking have it.
Yeah.
That's all there is to it. It's so interesting to me that you came to that conclusion at such a young age.
Yeah.
Do you have any perspective on why you were able to sort of like, is that a thing that mom and dad talked about? Is that
this still comes from my religious father, that he was like at the end of high school for me, he was like, like, just ask God what he wants you to do, and, you choose your path. And, you just make those decisions and, ask God what he wants you to do, and he'll open the doors.
It's funny because you specifically just talking about it in that manner kind of brings me around to one of you were saying before that, like, you consider yourself agnostic, but you have no like disrespect for the religion. And that's another thing that took me a while to come back around on. But like, I think that's one of the things that gets lost in that religious, anti-religious debate, is the idea that at the end of the day, you can say what you want about the organizations, but the thought process behind whatever you call whichever religion is basically just like, how do you explain the world?
They're metaphors.
Yeah.
I think that the Bible and whatever are great as metaphors. When you start looking at it as a history book,
right,
and like, or you start misinterpreting the metaphors as something very fucking literal,
right?
And you suck all the value out of it that way. It's like, if you just try and read the stories and then smoke a joint and think about it a different way,
right?
And open about what it's trying to tell you,
right?
But it doesn't. For me, it doesn't work as a history book.
Yeah.
But as just stories that, to think about life a certain way. And I think a lot of these stories can contradict themselves, just like life, Well, yeah, that's the truth of the yin yang, It's just like, are things this way or are things this way? They're both.
Yeah, it's
at the same time.
It's perspective at the end of the day, just like everything else.
Yeah,
it's incredibly interesting to me that you were able to come to all of those conclusions so young. And it's sort of because of a thing that you end up walking away from later on. It's just the kind of going back to what we were talking about before we started recording. Every day I'm confronted with the idea that life is just stupid.
Yeah.
Right? So, all right. So you come to Toronto and you end up working for Vice. So talk to me about that process. Talk to me about that little adventure.
So yeah, when I started there, it was me and one other guy above. There was a Vice store at the time.
Okay.
At Queen and Peter. And as far as the office is concerned, it was me and this guy, Sean Phelan, just the two of us. Because now, fast forward all these years later, I mean, they just laid off a bunch of people. But 2 years ago, they had gotten hundreds of millions of dollars of investment from Rogers to make this television station. And there was there was 200 people working there.
Right.
And it's like, wow, I was there when it was a shitty apartment above a store and it was just two of us.
Right.
And, I was doing ad sales a little bit for like a year and a half, and I wasn't that great at it. And Sean really didn't want to I think he was very quickly disappointed in me, but every once in a while, and he was kind of a dick to me, but he would give me this little tidbit of information every once in a while.
Right.
That would be like, oh, like he really I have my own thing that I'm good at.
Mm-hmm.
And he definitely has, I mean, he's like the head of sales still there. Like he's like the most successful ad sales guy in the company.
Right.
Like, I could have definitely learned more from him, but I learned some. He did, it was worth for me personally, it was worth the abuse I took from him for a while, because he did like give me some tidbits of information here and there that I really was able to take with me.
Right. Give me some of those.
Fuck, I don't know if I can
get into a corner.
Yeah. I'll tell a little bit more of the story, and then if I think of one of Sean's things that he told me, because a lot of them too, because it's not to sidestep, it's just like a lot of the things that he would have said to me that,
don't make sense out of context.
Yeah, it was such a personal thing to where I was at the time, that it was like, oh, don't think of it this way, think of it this way.
Right.
And like, I can think of one thing. Him and there was a guy that started, another guy named Tim that started working there a few months after. He only lasted a few months, but I was, I was talking to some potential client or something, and I was talking about the situation, and they were like, just tell the guy to stop being an asshole. You can just like say, stop being a dick. And then the person will say, okay, I'm kind of being a dick. And I'm like, oh, I'm like, you can just say like, hey, can you stop being an asshole? And you don't have to be a dick about it. But you can just, bring something to light to sometimes people, and they'll be like, okay, you're right, I'm being a dick.
That's actually really funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's hilarious. Do you use that often?
I don't know, but it's somewhere in the back of my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And just certain things about just like getting work done. I think another thing that Sean taught me was just about grinding it out. That, Vice had this like sort of image in a way of being a party, magazine,
right.
But it's like grinding it out every fucking day. It's like, yeah, you make a few $100s here, and then you make $50 here. It's like you make $1,000 here and you make $50 here, because it's like, you still got to make that $50. Just because there's like the big things you do here and there, you're grinding. You still got to fucking like bust your ass and make the money where you can.
That's really it. How long were you with Vice?
4.5 years full time.
Right.
And then I've still been delivering the magazine for like 10 years after that.
Right.
But
did you write for them at all?
A couple of articles. There was really not, when I was there, it was just it was a marketing office.
Okay.
So all the editorial was coming out of New York.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just like we were trying to sell regional ads, and then but the business at the time was just the magazine, and then they had that store, but they were selling $800 jeans there. It was just like it was a money loser. And then they closed that, and then for years, they were working on trying to get the television thing up and running, and even the website wasn't monetized at that time because nobody was, advertising agencies weren't spending money on print, or they were spending it on print. They weren't spending it on online at the time,
right?
And it was around the time that I was there that they sort of started to monetize that. And then eventually
you get to see that transition from inside. That's really interesting.
It gave me a lot of insight.
Yeah.
And even though I was never a good ad sales guy, I was spending 2 years on the team, like being on the group emails and stuff. It just like, I learned a lot. And then I became the production manager for the magazine. So I was sort of like the middleman where I'm between the plant and the designers and the ad sales guys. And so like, we're having to like, okay, the deadline's coming up. I got to chase the ads, make sure, just check that they're all the right specs, get them to the designer. So it was sort of like things were passing through me. And then if something fucked up, then it was my fault. It's
interesting because you got like a hardline look at the business side of journalism and entertainment.
And that was a big thing, is that, going back, just to loop back again to, me being 19, and even though I always felt like I was more in the creative side, like naturally, I pursued the business side. Like I went to recording school, I did those internships, and then I got into ad sales and production at Vice because it seemed to me like if you know the business, that's where you that's where you make it happen.
Well, yeah, at the end of the day, if you want to make a living doing something, you better figure out how the money is created around it, right?
Exactly. You got to know the business. And then, now I get to have fun with what I do now. But to finish so anyway, so I left Vice and 2009, and then I had a year on EI, and then that's when I started just like fixing up this house. I've been living in this house since the whole time I've lived in Toronto. This is the only place I've lived.
Oh, cool.
And I started like throwing New Year's Eve parties here. Well, I started doing that in 2007. But I got a tool shed in the back. I was doing photography for a while. So there's enough space in this house. I was able to keep my photo gear here, able to keep my tools here, have the band gear here. And I was a sound tech. So I spent a lot of time just like one day I'd be taking photos. The next day I'd be doing sound for a show.
Right.
And just busted my ass for the next several years. Yeah, it's been 10 years since I left Vice full time. And for I guess, and then also so I was doing photography, whatever. And then I got a job on the Strombolopolis show at CBC.
Oh, okay.
For a year. George came to one of my New Year's Eve parties.
Oh, nice.
And that was like the year that he came, it was like the year that my parties went from being something that a group of a few hundred people knew about to sort of being like in the public consciousness of Toronto.
Yeah, because you said fucking Toronto media would show up to these things, right? So explain this to me. So,
one thing with my time at Vice was that I would go to, I didn't grow up coming up to Toronto. Being in Windsor, you feel a lot more American at times because all the media is American.
Yep.
We never had cable growing up, so I never watched much music or anything.
And we're all exempt from the CRTC stuff in Windsor.
Exactly. Yeah. So I didn't know any Canadian music at all. And so I would just go out to anything when I worked at Vice that I could get on the guest list for. It could be like a media event for vacuum cleaners. Right. And if there was a guest list, like I would go because I was just trying to figure out what the fuck was going on in the city.
Right.
And I had this access through them.
Nice.
Even though there wasn't any editorial here, it was still just like they'd have us come out to stuff. And so, and through the number of, and Vice would throw parties and sort of got some, insight there. And so I learned, and I had the contacts to throw really good events here. Mm-hmm. Couldn't do them every day. It was about taking 6 months at a time to like collect all of the favors, I guess, in a sense, or like ask people to, to curate the event. So, when, and I'd put up the PA myself, I'd have like a band in here, band in the basement, and, I have a giant backyard. So people would I have like tents in the backyard.
So, but because people can't see this, but figure it out. We're in fucking Toronto. It's not like you live on a farm.
Yeah.
Right. This is a small like you're in a city neighborhood.
Yeah.
Here. You had thousands of people come out here and your neighbors hundreds of people come out and your neighbors didn't hang you.
Well, because I didn't do it very often.
Okay.
And I would have I'd put baffles in these windows.
All right.
So that window would be all just covered with egg carton foam and curtains.
Okay.
So you could walk by and it wouldn't be, and I'd have security and everything. I'd go all out.
There's still hundreds of people in your neighborhood.
I'd keep people off the street and make sure I had security to make sure people weren't leaving with open alcohol containers. Cool. So there's things I did to make sure, and because I was doing it, on New Year's Eve, and then I'd have one summer barbecue.
Okay.
During North by Northeast.
Oh, okay.
So it wasn't that my neighbors had to deal with it every day.
It's just amazing to me that you could get away with throwing a party that large in I
don't know if you can now, because it's the thing. It's just the city's changed so much. Everything's so unaffordable here now.
Right.
I'm just lucky I've been here for so long.
Right.
If and when I lose this place, I'm gonna have to figure out something else for sure, because the rents here are out of control these days.
Yeah.
Mine isn't, but I've been here for 14 years.
Right. No, it's incredible to me. So these parties get going, and then you've got hundreds of people showing up. How does media end up coming out to it? Because it's not a thing that you would promote like that, right?
I guess because I had a lot of media contacts from, being
Right.
at Vice, that I knew a lot of media people.
But did you pursue it that way, or did they just start reporting?
All the media I ever got was never like me reaching out and pitching. It was always them calling me.
That's funny.
And then it became a thing because I would get some media outlet covering my New Year's Eve party every year.
Mhm.
It sort of just became like, I think that they'd probably, the newsroom, they'd have these like brainstorming sessions. Okay, what are we going to do this week? And it'd be like, 159 Men, and they're having a party. They've been covered in the past.
Mhm.
And so then somebody else would call me.
Right.
And then that's how I got the job on the Strombolopolis show. Was George came out, saw this party, and was like, "That's the craziest party I've ever been to."
Right.
We got to get this guy on the show. So I was the audience coordinator for a year.
Oh, that's funny. Okay.
So I saw like 300 interviews he did in the course of 9 months.
How was that experience?
I was very overworked at the time because I was also the sound tech at Parts and Labor.
Okay.
Where Matty Matheson was the chef. And I would be there like 5-6 nights a week. So I would be at CBC during the day for 10 hours.
Mhm.
And then I would go to Parts and Labor at night and be out till 2 or 3 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd be back at the CBC in the morning at 9 a.m.
Right.
So, for those 9 months, I was working 90 hours a week.
Right.
It was, and I'd still, I'd deliver Vice on the weekend once a month.
Right.
So, but I, was able to pay off a bunch of debt that year. I had to do it because I before I got that job at CBC, I was reaching my limit as far as like,
you had spent like a year plus just kind of on your own, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'd been on EI for a year after Vice, and then I spent another year just sort of like
existing.
Yeah, well, just people would call me. I guess that's a running theme for me, is that people would just call me and be like, "Will you do this?" So like the budget's $100, the budget's $300, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just doing whatever people would, whether it's like painting somebody's house,
right,
or shooting. Like I shot a Sloan album cover here.
Sweet.
I'll have to show you later.
Yeah.
It was their record store day, 12-inch.
Oh, cool.
So it wasn't an album cover, but it's a 12-inch cover.
It's interesting because like you talked earlier about coming from a factory town like Windsor and not having any connections to what that's like, and it's funny because it was kind of what we were talking about before we started recording, but like just switching your mentality from that I have a job to go to every day to what you were talking about with Vice with like, no, go find that next $50. There's a huge mental shift there. Did you have to build up to that idea, or did that kind of come more natural to you because of like the family you grew up in?
I mean, everything's always been a process and a grind, as far as just like, because even like, that was another thing with my family, is just there was no financial support.
Right.
From my family, it was like, okay, you got to go out and do it on your own.
Mm-hmm.
And so by the time the CBC thing came up, like my line of credit was at its limit. My credit card was almost maxed out. So it was like, there's no more fucking give here. Like, I got to pay this fucking money off.
Yeah.
And, they put me at the bottom of the pay scale at CBC, even though I'd already spent 4.5 years at Vice.
Right.
But Vice wasn't. It's funny because some of my boss at CBC 2 years later ended up going to Vice. It's just like, I'm in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Right.
Like, I'm at Vice when it was a cool thing, but not bringing in all the money.
Right.
Then I go to CBC as they're losing money, and then all these CBC people go to Vice, and I'm just like...
Oh, yeah, too, because there was a big transition at CBC around that same time, too, right?
So it's like, as far as like the perspective and like getting to see... I don't know. I've seen a lot of cool shit, but at the same time, just financially, things haven't started working out for me until the last 3 years, probably.
Right.
I had 1 or 2 really good years at Vice.
Were you playing in bands through all of that?
I started playing in bands again, in 2009, right before I left Vice. I started playing in bands,
mm-hmm.
but nothing that really took off. I mean, I guess actually in 2010, right after my EI ran out, I did a tour with this band Mohawk Lodge and Eamon McGrath. We did a European tour.
Oh, Eamon's been on the show.
Oh,
yeah.
So me and Eamon spent 5 weeks, 2 months in a van.
Oh, sweet.
Together, and then
a great guy.
Yeah, and then his buddy. Well, then him and Peter went and started July Talk right after that.
Right.
And, and then those guys have been making money. But I had been in a band with Danny Miles, the drummer from July Talk, and sort of...
He's supposed to be coming up on the show very shortly.
Yeah,
he's got a new band out right now, too.
Yeah. So I had introduced Danny to those guys because we needed a drummer for the Ontario and Quebec dates after the European tour.
Oh, very cool.
So that's sort of how Danny got involved with those guys.
Great.
London guy.
That's hilarious that all of that is connected, and I had no idea as well.
So, so I guess that was that's another connection there, is going from, I did that tour and then came back, got that job at CBC.
Right.
Got another year of EI out of that after that.
Right.
And, and then I think the karaoke band started right after that. So I started the karaoke band 5 years ago.
So talk to me about this. So this is I just love everything about this, to be perfectly honest with you. So walk me through how this got started, all of it.
So there was a bar, there's a club called the Hoxton, which is the same owners as Parts and Labor, the social group.
Okay.
And the sound tech there called me and said, there's a corporate event coming up in a few weeks. They don't have a lot of money. They want to have a karaoke band. I don't even know if this exists. Can you make this happen on some level? Just come up. Can you guys put up a list of 20 songs? You're only going to play for 45 minutes.
Right.
Can you doesn't even have to be good. Just make it happen.
Right.
I'm like, I can do that. So we pulled the band together in 2 weeks. I'm like, I think Jesse knows how to play guitar. I think Fraser, he works at Parts and Labor. He's really good at drums. So I just called some dudes, and they're still in the band today, 5 years later.
Right.
And then it just took off from there. We did the one gig, and then
talk to me about the one gig, because the name of the band comes out of how you put this practice together.
We're jamming, and we're like, okay, next song, good enough, and then now I have a good enough live karaoke
that's
death
hilarious,
metal logo.
because any good death metal logo, I had no idea what the fuck it said. Yeah,
good enough live karaoke.
That's hilarious.
So we. And then I think we got a gig at Clinton's was the next. We had a weekly or a bi-weekly there, and we were playing at Parts and Labor once a month.
Right. And
then it just kept growing. After a year, the original drummer he was had gone to Humber for the jazz program.
Mm-hmm.
So killer fucking musician who knows what's up. And I was self-taught. And still really sucked at the time.
Right.
But, and I can see why he was so frustrated. He quit because he was just like, this is what we suck. We're fucking up too many songs.
Right.
But the thing is that people still liked it. We'd play these shows and we'd play, 30, 40 songs in a night. And we'd biff 7 of them pretty hard.
Nobody but you ever fucking heard it.
Yeah. Or they just didn't care. They're just there to have a good time.
That's it.
And so I had to get new people in the fold and started bringing in more musicians.
Yeah.
And then I had somebody approach me. We have a booker now. Her name's Jen Cowan, and she does all the corporate site I sent you. Right. She's designed that, and she runs that. I'm sort of hands off.
Nice.
I do all the bar bookings. She does all the corporate bookings.
Nice.
And as those corporate bookings started coming in, I was able to kind of bring, some of the original guys back. I'm like, here's some money.
Right.
And they're like, okay, I'll do it.
So talk to me about this, because I want to get into what just went down this last weekend, but I want to talk about, because you've told your whole story. So it's not like you've come up being like this striving musician your whole life.
Yeah.
You've just worked in entertainment your entire life, which is incredibly similar to the story I told you about me.
Yeah.
Right. So it's really interesting to me that you get to this point where you're now doing a karaoke band. And anybody that I know that spends their life being a musician, you say karaoke to them and they're ready to fucking slit their throats.
Yeah.
Right. And it's so interesting to me, because you didn't have that like that bias towards it going in, right?
Yeah.
So, but talk to me about the process of dealing with these these musicians and being like, all right, come on, we're going to go play other people's shit for a while.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that Fraser.
I don't even mean him. I mean, even the guys that are in the band today. I wasn't trying to on that one specific thing, but.
The kind of people that are in this band, you got to be like a good musician who can play a lot of fucking songs, has the memory, because we have 400 songs in our repertoire. Right. So it takes a certain type of musician who's, no pun intended, good enough to like pull it off, but also isn't going to want to slit their throat if a song goes haywire or something happens or if the singer's bad.
Right.
For the most part, I think, most singers we get are pretty good, surprisingly good. You would think before I started this band, I would have thought that way more people would suck at singing. But it's the 1 in 100 people who has the absolute worst timing. That's the worst.
Right.
They can sing off key. As long as they got good timing, we can follow them. As a drummer, you can understand that.
Yeah.
But if they're coming in, 2 beats or 2 bars too late on every fucking line,
right?
And then you try to correct them, and they still go. It's just like, what are we? But
it's hilarious because it's an entirely different skill set.
Yeah,
like that's not.
It's about the singer,
right?
And also we got to do things like when you rip a guitar solo. The crowd loves that, and there's certain nuances to the music that, the music's important. It is, and that's another aspect of us calling it good enough live karaoke. But the band played 256 shows last year. Right. I probably played 205 of those. Right. I've probably played, I don't know, around 40 shows this year. We're like towards the end of March, and we'll probably end up matching. I don't think we're going to beat last year's record. Right. The year before that, we'd done 178 shows. Ooh. And then the year before that, it was 76.
Wow.
So it's been exponential of I think it was probably, 20 shows the first year or something. And then, 40. And then.
Talk to me about figuring out that this was an industry.
Well, that's the thing is that nobody else is really, there is other karaoke bands out there, but we're the ones who are we play in London at Rec Room. We play every other Friday. We do Heartwood Concert Hall in Owen Sound every 2 months. We do first Friday of the month in Port Elgin. So that's 3.5 hours from here. Right. And then for Toronto, we do Rec Room Toronto across from the Sky Dome 2 Thursdays a month. We do Gladstone Hotel once a month. On a Saturday, we do every other Monday at the Drake Hotel. Mm-hmm. So it's a matter of we're just up there grinding it out, doing it all the time. And it's okay, play this song. Play this song. Right. And it's a list. It's not like it's just every song out there. Sure. But we started with, I think that first gig, we had 20 songs. Right. And then the next gig, we had 40 songs. And then a couple months later, we got up to 80. Right. And so it's been an increase over these 5 years.
Who's the newest member to your group?
There's a guy named Daniel.
And how long's he been with the band?
About 6 months, but he hasn't played in 3 months because we're sort of but I've been talking to him. He's going to be starting to play shows again in about a month.
How long of a transition is it to get somebody new in and up to speed?
That's the thing. It's at this point to try and join the band, right? It's the bar is very high, right? Because how are you going to remember all those songs? How are you going to know? There's just certain things, even Sweet Child of Mine is, the Guns N' Roses version is tuned a half step down. Every string is tuned a half step down. So we just play it standard tuning. Right. And same with a lot of Weezer stuff but then we'll play a lot of the Weezer stuff. We'll just move it down a fret. So it's still in the original key. There's a lot of things
they're all bar chords and shit, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that where it's this song, we play things in the original key for the most part. Right. But yeah, there's just certain small things, and you're doing this in front of an audience. Right. So, and also when you're playing with dudes that have played hundreds of shows, then they want to play the song the way, they want to get it right.
Right.
So the bar is very high to try and join the band at this point. And I think like we do a lot of double lineups during the fall. Like this is sort of our slow season. We're doing, 14 shows a month right now. We were doing 25. I think we did 29 shows in December.
Okay.
So, but when we're doing that many shows, then I'll have like
29 in December, and there's a week there you were not working for sure.
Well, we didn't play Christmas Day, but we played Boxing Day up in Owen Sound. We played the day actually that week we were pretty busy. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I guess because there's a lot because you're doing corporate stuff, so there's a lot of parties and shit.
A lot of holiday parties, and then a lot of places were just trying to fill their week with something like we're a good draw for like in between Christmas and New Year's.
Okay, so we've got a karaoke band. We're building an industry out of it.
Yeah,
that's all well and good.
And I can do 2 or 3 bands at once, even.
Oh, nice.
I'll have one in Guelph, one in Toronto.
Oh, right. How many people are in the band total now? In the group,
I think 13. There's 4 of us that are full time.
Okay,
this is our only job.
Right.
And then the rest of the guys are part-time.
And how many people show up? So like, your band's coming to play my corporate gig. How many people show up to the corporate gig?
I would say our sweet spot would be between like 100 and 200 people.
No. I mean, for the band. Like, so there's 13. It's not 13 musicians. So
4 or 5.
You do it 4 or 5?
We used to do 5 more often. Now I'm sort of down to 4. Because at a certain point back when we first started, a lot of us had gaps in who knew the songs.
Right.
So then I'd be like, okay, well, hopefully if there's 5 of us here, at least one of us really knows whatever song is called. Right. And then that person can kind of lead it.
Gotcha.
But at this point now it's just like, it's better to just have 4.
Right.
It just sounds tighter. There's less noise.
Financially, it makes more sense.
Yeah. It's just one less guy to split the money with.
Right.
So yeah, 4 is and I play keys and guitar.
Okay.
And then I'll have a lead guitar player there, bass, drums.
Nice. Okay. Talk to me about the fucking Junos, man.
So that came up a few months ago.
Yeah.
We were approached. So most categories, they have 5 nominees. This one, there was only 3 because that's sort of a new category. So they had Karaoke, a band from Montreal, and then another band from Vancouver that were all nominated. And then I think just because they're, as I was saying when we were talking earlier, that as the record industry is sort of suffering right now, people aren't buying CDs. Mm-hmm. People are on Spotify.
Right.
So the recorded music industry is, it's not what it was in the 90s. So they're trying to find new ways to, promote live music and live performance. So we were asked if we would want to, put our names in the hat for that a couple months ago.
Nice.
And it ended up coming up.
Talk to me about that process. So you said you were asked. A, who's doing the asking? And B, like, what's that conversation like?
It was through our corporate booker. So, I'm not sure but they were what the exact name of the person was.
No.
But,
I'm just in general.
Yeah, they just they put it forward and asked if we would want to have our names in.
Gotcha.
And they let us know it wasn't going to be part of the televised cast.
Right.
And we had to put in a $750 fee.
Oh, you have to. Okay, so you have to pay to apply.
Yeah.
Okay.
But what we get with that is that we get to attend the ceremony,
right,
and stuff. So and then so it came up, and then just the response once it happened is like really overwhelming. Just like it's awesome, and go to the coffee shop and I'm getting like congratulations there. So.
Right. We should tell people you won the fucking thing.
Yeah. Best live karaoke band, the inaugural year of the category. So hopefully that's something that'll keep growing.
And you said it wasn't part of the televised event, right? So what was the ceremony like?
It
was it in London?
It was at Budweiser Arena. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was just cool to like see all these big stars there,
right,
from at least big stars in the Canadian industry.
Sure.
And and like we played an after party for a weed company out there. Nice. And so it's all it's all sort of a blur in a way, because it's just like you know, we were playing shows in Toronto the day before.
Right.
And then go out there, win this award, played another after party. And it's just like, you know, and then my phone's blowing up with all the social media response to it. So, you know, my head's still kind of spinning from the whole thing.
Yeah, because we're only like 7 days away from this, right?
Yeah.
So I guess you probably don't even have the trophy, right? Because
So the one that we had in the picture is just like a stand-in one, and they still got to engrave them, and then we have to, you know, order them.
Do you have any perspective on the night yet?
No, it's still just sinking in.
It's so cool, man. Like it's so I love that it came out from this thing that just sort of like showed up
organically. I didn't even come up with the idea.
Yeah.
But I'm the one who I used to always say I'm the worst musician in the band. It may or may not be true. I don't know if it's true anymore. But it's like all the people that I play with are so good.
Right.
But I'm the guy who, you know, theater production on cruise ships, being the production manager for Vice magazine, you know, holding all these different hats in my freelance days. You know, and it's nice for me now that I don't have to switch gears so often. That like all the gears I'm going through, I'm still having a lot of hats, but at least it's all mainly towards the karaoke band now.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it's all those experiences have sort of led to me being able to be good at booking the you know, the bar shows and doing the business side of it and keeping it organized and, you know, trying to balance getting everybody getting along and feeling valued too, because, you know, I do have to call the shots, but at the same time, like I need the band members to not be like, hey, fuck it, this isn't worth it, or to not want to go and start their own karaoke band or something.
Right.
It's like, how do I keep them working with me?
Yeah.
How do I keep them, you know, and it's, you know, we play long fucking sets, 3-4 hours. But there's bad things that go along with it. You know, sometimes we can get tired by playing that long. You know, you get some frustrating singers, but at the same time, it's like some of the things I love about it are that we're up there playing. Like, you know, there's so much music gear I collected over 20 years since the WonkaVision days that I'm like, okay, like I need this to be able to do this. But then I'm just always going and doing other gigs that have nothing to do with that. Finally, I get to use this gear. Like I have my guitar and I'm on stage with it 4 hours a night, 15 nights.
Making a living.
Yeah, and I'm playing that fucking guitar. I'm playing these keys.
That's awesome.
And like you get to use this shit. And there's something to be said for that of just like, you know, compared to jamming in a basement.
Right.
It's like we don't get tired and then, you know, take a break and, you know, we're up there playing 40 songs. And another aspect that I like about this band is that it's not about our taste. You know, like, you know, I gave you, you know, like that G.G. Allen patch we got here. And, you know, we got Bite It, You Scum is on our list. And we've got, you know, we've got like some Minor Threat and Misfits on the list. But really, like, we're playing Backstreet Boys.
Right.
Journey, Don't Stop Believing.
Right.
That new Lady Gaga song, Shallow, we're playing almost every night.
Right.
And, you know, a lot of times when you're in a band, you know, everybody's got to put their 2 cents in. Oh, let's play this song. I don't want to play that. That sucks.
Right.
It's like, take your that sucks, throw it out the fucking window. It's like, if that's what people want to sing, you play it.
Right.
And you play it true to the original as possible. And that it's not about our taste in music, because in my taste in music, it's like, it doesn't really, like, for us to play Black Flag, it just doesn't really, it doesn't translate to what we do that well. It's better for us to play Backstreet Boys.
Right. No, I think it's incredible that you were able to sort of develop a business out of pieces of all of this that kind of created this thing that wasn't like this niche that didn't exist before.
Yeah, because there's been other karaoke bands. I've heard of other bands that have been around longer than us. Mm. But, you know, they do it at one bar once a month for 8 years now. And I don't, you know, and I'm not really in touch. I just sort of see it online, you know. Yeah. So I don't know any of these other bands really personally.
Right.
But, you know, I keep getting calls and adding new residencies. And then even the way that different people have joined, some people are people that I, called, the original dudes. And then also along the way, there's people that have approached me and be like, if you ever need a guitar player, let me know. I think I could do this. And the thing is that I've found if someone approaches me and thinks they can do it, they probably can. Because they'll know. And like, even I can play 500 songs. If you can't, why would you think you can?
Yeah. There's not a lot of It's people know their limitations before they get into it.
Exactly. So generally, if somebody has asked me, they're usually and there's still a definite learning curve.
Yeah.
But I still have to use I have an iPad up on my keyboard stand for charts. So I have on Ultimate Guitar, I have different charts saved, and I have it saved in the right key because it'll say capo 3. So I got to add +3, save it so that it's in the actual.
Right.
And I still need charts for certain songs, and other guys in the band they have 400 songs up in here and
that's crazy.
Have all the fucking solos.
Right.
I mean, and I'm there for half the songs, but again, that's not really my strength is more like the other details that are all in here that it's like, these are the gigs we're having. This is who's on the gigs. And, other people in the band will be like, wait, so who's in Guelph and who's in London that night? And
right. And you're like, how do you not know this?
Yeah. I'm like this, because this is the lineup because, so-and-so needs that person to balance them out, or I need this person to lead the band that night.
They have no idea.
And so it's all that's another art of doing this 100%. Band that you can't just take any 4 people from because there's the full timers in Good Enough Live Karaoke, or as we short form it, GELP.
Yeah.
And so I'll try to split up the full timers if I have 2 shows.
Right.
Because I want to have 2 and 2 or whatever on each, and then so that they can help make it the best they can be, instead of it being, this is band 1, this is band 2, this is band 3. Everybody plays with everybody eventually.
No, I think it's awesome, man. Dude, after what is it, 25 fucking years? It's been great hanging out with you again. Thanks for coming on the show.
AJ.
Congratulations on the Juno, and best of luck to you for all of the stuff that you've got coming forward, man.
Thank you.
We will see you next time, folks. Check out, we've got some other videos that'll be popping up right here. Check some of those out, and we will see you next time.
That'll do it for this episode of the AVB Podcast. Don't forget you can subscribe to our full audio episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere you find your audio podcasts. The full episodes, highlights, and our live off-the-floor performance videos can be found at our YouTube channel, and you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at the AVB Podcast. Of course, you'll find links to our incredible sponsors and this week's guest in the description below. The AVB Podcast is part of the Border City Network. Find more great content at bordercitynetwork.com. See you next time, folks. Bye-bye.